Hello and welcome to the Where People Meet podcast, the event technology podcast for the worldwide meetings and events industry. I'm your host, Mitch Malinsky, head of sales here at Feedloop in beautiful and sunny Toronto. And today I'm joined by the one and only Merijn van Buuren, founder and CEO of Event Mender. Now, what is Event Mender? It is an online marketplace that helps event planners source the best event management solution based on their unique needs. With so many event technology solutions available in the market, and trust me, as an event technology provider, I would know, it can oftentimes be overwhelming for event planners to narrow down their options and select the best solution for their specific needs. Now, Event Mender comes in and allows planners to seamlessly view and compare top event solutions in one place, making the selection process a breeze. I'm very excited to sit down with Merijn to learn more about his career, Event Mender, and anything else he wants to share with the Where People Meet audience. So Merijn, just want to start today by saying thank you very much for joining us. I'm really excited about it. But to start, can you tell us where you are calling in from?
Yeah, of course. First of all, thank you very much for having me, Mitch. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course.
I'm joining currently from finally also a sunny Rotterdam in the Netherlands. It's not as often that the sun shines, but luckily we have had a few good days. And pleasure to join. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear you've got some sunshine out in Rotterdam. Let's dive in if it's okay with you. And to start, would be great if we could get a bit of background on yourself, how you got started in the meetings and events industry, and then we can move the conversation along from there.
Yeah, for sure. Like in the industry in general, I've been there for quite a while because as a relatively little kid, I was inspired by the likes of Merijn van Buuren to be a DJ. So that was kind of my first entryway into the industry. Has been a very nice journey there. But simultaneously, I was also working in the hospitality industry, in a lot of restaurants, venues, pretty much on every aspect of the event industry, from running the catering to helping people. And after a lot of different iterations in my life path, I ended up at a physical event company here in Rotterdam, actually. And whilst I was working there, mainly on the sponsorship side, actually, to find ways how they can enhance the value for their sponsorships. The unfortunate situation happened. I'm not going to mention the P word, but we all know what happened. And obviously, they were completely focused on physical events. And at that time, we had about 2 weeks to organize the biggest event that they did for that year.
Oh, wow.
And if we couldn't organize that, that was pretty much end of story, because there was a lot of sponsorship values or money involved that was already spent. And if they wanted to get their money back, that was going to be a trouble, big problem. So I came up with the idea to just do a virtual solution. And whilst no one in the company really knew how that could look like or what to do, they were like, "You're our last hope. Good luck. You have 2 weeks to pull it off." And that was an interesting journey as well, but learned a lot. We were able to pull it off, retained all the sponsorship values as well. So for me, it was an eye-opener. I was like, wow, in 2 weeks, we were able to pivot, to transition everything to virtual. We were able to retain over 2 million in sponsorship value for very little cost. Like, we were able to do it very agile. Obviously, it needed to be done last minute and be very creative. But that for me was really, this is the future. Although the management itself was more on the tomorrow we're going back to in person. So thank you very much, but we're not going all in. I had a different path, and that was when another company reached out to me. They're like, "Hey, you helped them do this. Can you help us do it? Because we have the same problem. We believe that it's going to last a while. So we need to have a backup solution and would love to get you on board." And that's pretty much where I decided to start my own business, helping physical event companies transition to virtual. That was called Virtual Positive, actually. Have been doing that for quite a while, where I helped with both the ideation and the implementation. So I was there to brainstorm on how to do it, but also pick the right event platform, set up the event platform, be anywhere from speaker management to tech support, every role in the virtual event space I've had. Learned an awful lot in that small period of time.
Yep.
But whilst I was doing that, I kind of ran into the problem that there were so many platforms, pretty much popping out everywhere. And my clients were like, is the platform we're having still the best platform that we're supposed to use? Is there another solution? And although I wanted to give them a good answer to that, there wasn't really enough time because it was a hectic period. You had a lot of things going on to do proper research. And whilst I was looking for it, I thought there must be a tool that helps event professionals find those right tools and narrow down the huge list of platforms that are there to only a select few that match my requirements. But turned out there wasn't any. There were a lot of directories, a lot of lists, but they didn't make my process easier. So that's where I started to brainstorm on how can I help more event professionals scale virtual in this regards, embrace the technology and make that whole process of finding that technology a lot easier. And that's where Event Mender born, or the idea for Event Mender was born.
Okay.
So we started with
if I
this.
can just pause you there, Merijn, because there's a
course.
lot to unpack here. So I was impressed when I went on your LinkedIn page, went through all the various positions that you've held over the years, but this is something. So if I may just quickly recap for the audience, March 2020, the P word hits. You are working at an in-person event management company. You have a major client, a major project that is no longer able to run that event in person. So you say, hey, let's pivot to virtual. And you took the reins. You got that in-person event pivoted to virtual within a span of 2 weeks. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. And did you have any experience with virtual events prior to that? Or was this something you were figuring out as you went along?
Well, not particularly. I have been a fan of just meeting online because it was a bit easier than going all the way across the world to meet people. But what helped me a lot was that when I was working actually at a blockchain consulting firm, one of the many iterations in my life path, I helped them to figure out a way how to do investor meetings online.
Yep.
And that kind of idea was the first spark for me where I was like, maybe we can find a way like this. It quickly became evident from talking to our exhibitors that just a Zoom meeting wasn't going to cut it. So we had to be a bit more out of the box in that regards. And luckily we found the right solution for it. But that was pretty much the first step.
All right. So you were well ahead of the times then. Okay. So you had this project, went off extremely well, retained the vast majority of the sponsorship dollars, and the client was very happy. And then you had a couple of other events and clients reach out to you asking, hey, you pulled this off. It was a tremendous success. Can you help with our in-person event transitioning to virtual? And that's how you got the idea for Virtual Positive. But at that time, the problem you were confronted with was, hey, there are so many different solutions in the marketplace. There seems to be a new company popping up every week back in the thick of the pandemic. So you were wondering, are there any online tools that can help me to not only put together a list of the different event management solutions that are out there, but understand my needs and point me in the right direction of what one is going to fit for my budget, what I'm looking to achieve. And that is essentially how you got the idea for Event Mender. Is my understanding correct?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good summary.
All right. Well, I love always learning about the ideation phase of how entrepreneurs got the ideas for their business. Oftentimes, it just comes from their own personal experiences, their own pain points and frustrations, and that seems to be exactly the scenario for you. So if it's okay, I'd love to drill down a bit deeper into that founding journey. Um, how long did this process take from identification of a pain point to ideation of a solution to actually founding the company and launching it to the market? What was that process? What was the timeline? Can you give us a deep dive on all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Longer than I anticipated. That's the short answer.
Yep.
um, so I think it was about January-ish 2021, where I was like, there need to be a better way, but I was kind of drowned in work, and at that point it was pretty busy. So it was an idea in the back of my head, and I was like, there must be a way, but let's first generate some more revenue and see if we can actually fund a project like this. And then about August that year, I was chatting with the person that I organized the online investor meetings with back in the day. So my old boss, so to speak. And we were just chatting. I was like, there must be a better way. I would love to grow this, but by the time I have a budget to develop something like this, it's probably already irrelevant. So I was kind of in the chicken and the egg story. At one point, I wanted to already get started, but I needed funds, and in order to get funds, I needed to work, but that meant that I couldn't get started. So, and then he was like, "What do you think you need?" Which was for me obviously a very interesting question, because I had the idea, but I didn't really think of how to execute it. What would I need? So he was like, "Put everything on paper. We'll have a look at it." So I put everything on paper, what I thought I would need, like did some research here and there, but obviously it was just a wild guesstimate, so to speak.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, well, you believe that this is going to be the future of the industry? I'm like, yeah, pretty sure. And yeah, then he was like, well, let's make it happen. I'll be able to help you to get through an MVP, and then we'll see how the market reacts from that. So that was pretty much the first angel investor that jumped on board, which gave me the possibility to take a step back from what I was doing, because if I wanted to do both at the same time, I wouldn't be able to have either enough time to deliver the quality for my clients, or to have enough time to actually get this project to where it needed to be.
Yeah.
So that is where I started. And instead of diving right in, because my first idea was to just start building right away. And then I was talking with developers, and they're like, what do you need? What are the features you want? How should it look like? And I'm like, yeah, more or less like this, but actually I don't really have an idea. So I had to get back to the drawing table, and I decided to first expand my network outside of my own bubble, because I've been in the Netherlands, which is a great country, but it's not by any means representative of the whole world. It's like 16 million people, over 7 billion. So I wanted to expand my reach outside in other regions, talk to different event professionals, and see, am I the only one that actually struggles with this? And if that's not the case, then what would they like to see differently? So that took about 3 to 4 months. So in December that year, I was like, okay, we have a good idea what we want to build. Let's start making first some clickable prototypes, just very basic, because we don't want to waste all the budget that we have by building something that we've later figured out it's not really what people meant when they were talking to us. So we started with a clickable prototype, experimented a bit, did some interviews, and yeah, it was pretty much like, oh wow, great ideas. This is what we like. This is what we hate. And then I got a good idea on how to develop it. And took a while to find the right development team to do it, because on one hand you want to get a solid product. On the other hand, you don't want to spend $1 million doing it, because I didn't have $1 million at all. So I needed to be creative, but also still figure out something that delivered the quality I had in mind. So whilst finding that development team was finally a success, we could start building an MVP. That launched pretty much a year ago, more or less, a little over a year ago. And we got some very positive feedback, also some very good feedback in terms of things that could have been different. And it became very evident that when we launched the MVP, we had kind of just threw all the features on one pile and let every platform just put their own features, which meant that if people wanted to compare a platform side by side, there was a quite a difference in how different platforms phrased a specific feature, which meant that in some ways it created more confusion than actually clarity in terms of making that decision. So there were a few things that we really needed to improve. But at the same time, kind of the MVP funding period was over. But luckily we were able to get a lot of partners on board, a lot of people that were like, this is great, and kind of gave a more or less statement on paper of like, I would love to use it. We had a few people in our testing group that were very happy about what we're doing. So when talking to more or less a development company, but it turned out to become our next investor, I was like, yeah, this is what we want to do. People are very enthusiastic. I would love to do it, but we first need to get some more revenue going. And then they were like, well, our founder is very interested in your project. Let's see if there's a way where we can collaborate, build a project together, get you some additional funding so you can sustain your runway a bit longer. And that's where we set out to build the beta version that pretty much was supposed to launch January this year, but I think it launched a month and a week ago, more or less. So it took a bit longer than we anticipated, about 4 months longer than I wanted it to be. And in that point, it was very hectic. I was like, we had to get this yesterday and very stressed. But looking back at it, I'm like, what's 4 months? If you're assuming we're going to stay here for the next 100, 200 years, then I probably made it a bit bigger of a deal than I wanted, but more or less it took 2 years in total, a little over 2 years, to get really from the first idea to finding funding to ideating to building an MVP to now launching a beta version, which is very much like 90% where it needs to be in terms of the alpha, like the official launch version, but it's very much good enough to be open in public.
Yes, well, first off, congratulations. It is an incredible journey, and it's an incredible solution that you've built over the past few years. I've had the privilege of sitting down with a lot of entrepreneurs on this podcast, learning about their founding journey, asking them how they got the idea, what it was like starting that company, any challenges or failures they ran into along the way. And Merijn, what really stands out to me about your founding process is the networking component and the fact that you focused so much on listening to the community. You had this idea, but you didn't dive right in. Instead, you took this idea, you put together a few case study groups. You said, hey, this is a need I see in the market. What are the different ways that you think it can be solved? And while you had your idea, you leveraged your network. You sat down with other professionals, people who would actually be the end users of your final product, and you listened to the feedback, you listened to the ideas from them so that you could implement them during the founding journey. And for us as a software company here at Feedloop, we've learned over the years that listening to the community, listening to the clients is what's going to lead you to the greatest success in the long run. Because if you can listen to your end users, if you can take the feedback, the ideas that they have, and then implement them within the platform, then that just leads to great relationships in the long run. It leads to the best product possible. And I just love the fact that instead of diving in, building your product based on your initial idea, you took that idea and then you iterated and you expanded on it based on the feedback, based on the needs and demands you heard from the market directly. So just want to say kudos to that. I think it's a really great way of founding the company, and I hope you continue to embrace that mentality going forward.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of the design thinking approach. Like, it's a lot about, well, first of all, just putting it out there, failing fast, and then improving faster, hopefully. But it's a lot about talking to your end customers. And I'm definitely not the first one to come up with the idea. But when I was exploring that area, it really resonated with me. And I felt that's really the way how I want to do business. Not like obviously you have a vision where you want to go, like this is what
Yeah.
it eventually should become, but that doesn't mean that every step you're taking is set in stone. If anything, by listening to your end users or your partners in our regards, then you'll realize that, oh, maybe I thought I would go straight, but if I go with a right turn and a left turn, I'll still get there, but then it will be a more comfortable journey for the actual people that are involved. And
Yeah.
I would, if I ever lose track of that, please let me know, because it's really core to what I feel like we should be doing here.
I will absolutely send you a LinkedIn message if I notice that, Merijn.
Appreciate it.
So we've gone over the journey, and to me, it's a really exciting, a very inspiring journey. Are there any notable moments in that journey, any lessons or takeaways resulting from key challenges that you were confronted with, or were there any failures along the way that you think are good learning opportunities for the audience to learn more about?
Many, like too
Yeah.
many to mention.
Yep.
I think I quickly kind of pointed out a few where one of is trying to build directly without knowing anything about what you're doing. Like you can build without actually building and putting in a lot of resources, because just
Mhm.
talking to people is also creating that idea, and that builds out what eventually will become the reality of what you're building. But in those first stages, don't waste a lot of resources on building something you don't know. Then the next one is really that you also mentioned, the networking part, where I knew it was or I had a feeling it would be a great approach to expand my network and talk to a lot of people about it. But that has been our biggest strength so far, in terms of not just being able to create a better product, but also being able to get yourself out there. Like the fact that you're inviting me to the podcast is because we kind of created a relationship along the way,
Yep.
which is in line with Event Mender, obviously, but it also helps to grow the brand outside of just the product. And that is also when I just recently came back from IMAX in Frankfurt. It's something you really notice when you get there. Like obviously, it's a lot of connections on LinkedIn, and they all seem not really tangible. But then when you meet them in person, it's like meeting an old friend that you spoke to for many years in a row, and then it's such a great way to already establish a connection, even though you haven't really met them in person yet. And that has been our biggest strength, not just in terms of creating the profile and the product, but also in terms of building the brand and making sure we are in touch with the right people to get more awareness out of there, to make sure that people notice what we're doing. Because that's also a big part of the journey, making sure that people are aware there is a solution. Because you
Yes.
can have an amazing product, but if they don't know that it exists, who's going to use it? So that's where marketing also comes in, obviously. But networking or relationships in that regard has been one of the more important than I could ever imagine myself before I get started. Another thing is, well, I mentioned it took longer than I anticipated. Everything is going to take longer than you anticipated. But again, looking back from the bigger picture, it might seem more insignificant, although at that point you're like, and it's not getting done and it needs to be done now because we're going to lose everyone who's involved. Don't stress too much about that part, although you need to be
Easier said
stressed.
than done.
Like you need to make sure that things getting done and you're always pushing to get it right in time. But the fact that you cannot do it in time, there's probably a reason why. I tend to believe that. And sometimes I had to remind myself of that fact, just because if you're getting frustrated, you let your emotions get in the way of making a good decision, making a thoughtful decision that you actually thought about, instead of in a rampage, or like, oh, we're throwing everything away because we have to finish it now, so we'll leave everything that's important on the table kind of situation. That is where it's good to find ways to ground yourself. And for me, it helps to look at the bigger picture and kind of know what the end goal is. And in this short term, I might not feel comfortable. I might not be happy with what is happening, but it is necessary to get there. You'll learn a lot from it.
Mhm.
And that gives you a different perspective than, oh, it's not happening, and like stressing out and feeling anxious about it. That it is definitely a tough one, but that is something that I'm constantly learning. I'm definitely not an expert on it yet. Every now and then I find myself in a headspace where I'm not as productive as I could be, just because I'm worrying, like, is it going to be ready? Are people actually going to buy what we're trying to put onto the market? Are we going to sustain ourselves? But at those points, really realize that you have this vision, you believe in it, and that's what it's going to be like. No matter what, we'll find a way,
Yep.
and regain that confidence, because that's where you get clarity in terms of your headspace, your mindfulness, however you want to call it, and that's when you can make the right decisions moving forward. Always having that overview from the top, so to speak, and
Love that.
that has been a big learning curve for me, like managing expectations and managing your own emotional well-being when
Yes.
expectations aren't met.
Yep, these are all some really good points that you raise. I'm particularly a fan of the idea of leveraging your community, leveraging relationships. And it's interesting what you said about being on site at IMEX Frankfurt. You've got so many connections that you've made over LinkedIn. You've never met these people in person before, but when you see them at the event, it's just like seeing a very good friend that you haven't seen in a very long time. So there is a lot of power in online relationships, even if they're not face to face. And that's something that I've seen you do a really good job of, Merijn, over the years. Is you've got a fantastic personal brand, you've got a very strong online presence, and you just continue to expand that network. Of course, it's good for marketing your brand, marketing Event Mender, but it's also just good for creating a community and a network of peers that you can go to for feedback, that you can bounce ideas off of. So I just really want to stress that you've done a fantastic job of that. And I think that's a very important thing for entrepreneurs, event professionals, really anyone in a professional environment to keep in mind for themselves. Um, Now, Merijn, we have done a lot of talking about Event Mender, and I gave a very brief overview of what Event Mender is at the top of the call, but I'd love to hear it in your words. So, for the audience, for the listeners, can you give us an overview of what Event Mender is, what the tool does, and who could benefit from it?
Yeah, of course. Well, very short, we help you as event professionals find the right virtual and hybrid event platforms. That's pretty much what I try to preach as much as possible.
Yep.
But to dive a bit more in detail, what makes Event Mender different from any directory is that we translate your needs, which are relatively common known needs, like how big is your event going to be, like what is your budget for a specific platform, what kind of experience are you looking for, what level of support do you require, how much customization does your event need, how long is your event going to be, is it 1 day or is it 365?
Yep.
And based on those 6 simple questions, you can already narrow down a lot of the platforms to only those that already match your requirements. So you don't have to look at platforms that cannot support the number of attendees that you're looking for, or that are in a different price bracket than that you're currently looking for,
Mhm.
or that don't have the experience you're looking for. Whatever it is, like, you'll only get matched with those that 100% match, so the best matches for you.
Yep.
And when you are on that overview of the platforms that match your requirement, we standardized all those features. As I mentioned, that was one of the failure points of our MVP. We now standardized it, and we also made sure we have the most elaborate feature breakdown you can ever possibly imagine, which might seem a little bit overwhelming at first. But obviously, feel always free to reach out to us. We have a human chat, not a AI robot that might not understand your question, but actually a human that you can talk to whenever you have help or questions needed. We're there for you. I really feel like that is also what sets us apart. We're not just a tool that you can use, but there's no customer support, which I get frustrated about a lot in some
Oh,
cases where
yeah.
I'm like, I just need to talk with a person. So that is one of the possibilities, but also it allows you to go into a specific feature segment. Let's say you're looking for networking tools that you would like to add to your event, or you're looking for a specific integration so that you can make sure that the tool actually works with your current tech stack. Those kind of things you can filter on specifically, like let's go to integration. Oh, I want to know that they can work with my CRM. Let's say it's a Salesforce or it's a HubSpot. You can click on them and then it will even narrow them down further to only those that 100% match that specific requirement. And that way you can really tailor the results to only those that really are the perfect fit for you, that have all the features that you're looking for. So you don't have to worry in that call when you're maybe experiencing a demo, like, does it have all these features? You already know that. All you have to do now is experience it and see if the look and feel and the experience of the platform is actually what you expect from it. But obviously there's also a video and some images, so you can already get familiar with it. But obviously I would recommend always have a bit of a demo, real experience in that regards. But if you don't want to take all those demos, you can also just request a quote and go more specifically in terms of what is the type of event you're doing, how many events are you doing, and get a tailored quote to your requirements, which helps you to narrow down it even further as well. So we really are here to help you as an event professional. Make sure that you don't have to go through 100 demos, although some of you are very proud of it, that, oh, I've done 100 demos. And I understand it's impressive, but it's also a waste of your time. And that is where
Yes.
we're here to help you make sure that no time is wasted. Whether you need a platform today or tomorrow, you can get it in a few clicks, not in weeks. And that's what we're here to do, to help you find a platform. It's free to use for an event professional, so there's no excuse.
Right.
If anything, if you find a new platform, so not one that you're already using, but you find a new platform that you would like to use, we actually give you 5% cashback on that deal, just to
Oh,
incentivize you to use Event Mender, because we know it is a hurdle to take a little bit of a different approach, but we're
yeah.
here to convince you that this is the way to go to save you hours and hours of time. So that's why we give you an additional incentive. Therefore, again, chat with the human in the chat. Not a bot. I'm more than happy to explain you anything you need to do to make that happen.
Seems like a no-brainer. Free to use, 5% cash back. Seems as if it's also addressing the exact pain points you experienced back in the pandemic when you started Virtual Positive and you were just overwhelmed with all the different solutions that were out there. So this is incredible. Congratulations, Feedloop. We've been privileged to be part of the beta program, and I love the experience so far. So we're definitely going to spread the word about this, share this with the audience. But what's next for your team? Are there any upcoming projects? Are there any upcoming initiatives that you're excited about for Event Mender?
Quite a few.
Yeah.
In essence, I was gonna say I'm not allowed to share, but I like to be transparent in that way. So a little heads up, we've done a previous season on the podcast, and we're going to enhance that a little bit, where we dive more into case studies of specific events. So let's say a big event that has been done hybrid, and talk to both the organizer, preferably also the tech supplier, maybe also an attendee, and hear from different stakeholders' perspectives, what went well, what could they improve, to really help event professionals get ideas on how they can improve their events and learn how others are doing it.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that is kind of
And
coming in the near future.
what's the name of that podcast?
Um, it's called the Event Effect.
Okay.
The Event
All right.
Effect.
We'll share that.
Definitely check it out.
Yep.
But also, we are still improving the platform. We are very open to feedback. As I mentioned, we love to listen to whatever you think we should improve, to see how we can incorporate your feedback in a way that helps other users also have a better experience at the platform. So no matter when you're listening to this podcast, if it's in 5 years from now, still give us all your feedback, what you're missing, because that's how we can improve the tool. But based on those conversations we've had so far, there are quite a few things added to the roadmap. One of the things for event professionals that is interesting to know is that in the relatively near future, it's definitely not going to be in the next 3 months. And as I mentioned, it's always going to take longer. So don't pinpoint me on an exact time. But what we're developing is also a possibility for event professionals to add their services. And for instance, say I'm an expert with working with Feedloop. And when then someone finds Feedloop as the best platform, they will also be recommended with an event professional. But we'll take it a bit further than that. It might become more of an ecosystem than just a matchmaking marketplace, but then we're talking long term. So there's a lot of interesting things. Definitely keep an eye out on what we're doing.
Oh, we absolutely will. And I'll be sure to share the podcast that you have going, the Event Member website, your LinkedIn page as well. Again, listeners, Merijn is very active on LinkedIn. He's got some great posts, some great insights. So if you're not already following him, I strongly recommend doing so. Merijn, this has been a really fun conversation. I loved sitting down, learning about your beginnings in the events industry way back when you were first listening to the DJs and being like, hey, I want to grow up to be like them. It was very interesting to learn about that first virtual project that you transitioned successfully in a matter of 2 weeks, and then the resulting demand that you got, founding Virtual Positive, all the pain points you experienced there in trying to find the best event solution for your needs, and that, of course, spawning the idea for Event Mender and where you are today. So thank you for taking the time to sit down with us, to share more about your founding journey, to highlight the importance of networking, leveraging your community and relationships, and finding a way to ground yourself and look at the bigger picture as an entrepreneur. So there were a lot of really important takeaways in this podcast. But before we wrap up, are there any final words, anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, one of my pet peeves, and don't get offended, it's not on purpose, but a lot of us event professionals are living a little bit siloed, where we have our people we've always been working with, and I totally understand that it's good to make sure that you can rely on the person because you did an event with them already, but it does mean that knowledge get in that silo. And I would love to see the event industry as general come together, share that knowledge, so we can also learn from your silo and share our knowledge from our silo, and then as an industry together improve. Because I know by chatting with a lot of different silos in that regards, that there's a lot of knowledge spread across different components of the event industry. And I would love to encourage everyone in the event industry to reach out outside of that bubble, talk with other event professionals. Maybe there will be some sort of an event on that in the future as well, but that is definitely 2024. But we'll keep you updated on that. Would love to see the industry as a general. I know we're standing together, we're supporting each other, and I'm very proud of that. It's a really good industry to be part of. But in terms of really sharing that knowledge, get it out there and share it, because together we stand stronger, we can do more and get the industry rewarded for what it's being like. Because most of the time, as event professionals, we feel like there's a bit of an afterthought. You aren't always being taken seriously as if it's a real job, although it's probably the most important part of the whole company's event, and making sure you're out there and connecting with people, bringing industries together. So together we can make sure that awareness is raised as well. So let's do that.
Incredibly well said. Couldn't think of a better way to end off this conversation. So again, Merijn, thank you for your time. There's a lot of ways that people can get in contact with you to learn more about Event Mender. So we'll be sure to share all of that in the podcast description. But to our listeners, that wraps up our Where People Meet podcast episode with Merijn van Buuren of Event Mender. Thank you for your time today, and we'll see you next time on the Where People Meet podcast.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. I